Today, we are going to look at the seeds you can start in February. If you do not know how my seeds to start per month videos work, I'm here to tell you that regardless of what zone you are in, you can start these seeds. The reason for that is because what matters is your first and last frost date, not your zone. Meaning, if you start these seeds anywhere in the month of February, you will be just fine. So if you live in a lower zone, say zone 3, you may want to start them later in February. If you live in a warmer zone, like a zone 8 or 9, you very likely want to start these seeds sooner in February. I give you about a 2-week buffer, give or take, to make sure that you can get all your seeds in according to the month. So February is one of those months that's kind of awkward. If you intend to do cold cover crops, meaning crops that are semi-resistant to frost and can be placed outdoors before your first frost date, your last frost date, you can start these now, and I'll give you what that list are. And those seeds, obviously, you need the proper gear and infrastructure to make that possible or viable. So not all seeds will apply to you, but some of these cold start seeds could be started later, and I will bring them up through the months, and I will let you know eventually when those cold start seeds can be placed outdoors without the infrastructure, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, just question down below. I will get to the comment. If I don't get to the comment, someone in the Git crew will, because they're a bunch of geeks like me and they know all the answers. So don't worry, you'll be taken care of. My dog is sleeping like in the middle of the tripod. So if you guys just like shuffle, I apologize. Okay, number 1 is onions or leeks or garlic if you're starting it from seed. Now, I already started mine at the end of January. You can start them in February as well, and that's particularly true if you have smaller onion bulbs that you're intending to grow. So in this case, I have the big Celery. 15 pounds is the world record for these bad boys. They don't ship to the US. I apologize. However, they are available in Canada. Now, what I will say about the onions is I encourage you to find out if you need long day or short day onions. I'll put a little bit of a blurb here, pause screenshot if you need to, because the importance here is that you get the onions that grow best in your environment. If you've ever struggled to get the proper onion bulb, you may have gotten the wrong onion seeds or starts to begin with. So just a heads up there. I do long day onions. Most of Canada should be doing long day onions. If you're farther south in the US, you may want to go for a short day. Just keep that in mind. Leeks, I mean, there's no long or short day. You can just grow whichever ones you want, but start them here in February at some point. Next up is tomatoes. Now, this doesn't go for all tomatoes. You can start some, particularly ones that are around the 100-day, 95-day mark could be started now. Keep in mind, you need the infrastructure to start tomatoes now. If you don't have the lighting, if you do not have a greenhouse, you don't have the gusto to be moving very large plants in and out of your house to harden off appropriately, do not start them in February. Start them in March. I will tell you when to start them in March, I promise you, but February is for those of which want the big bad boys. If you want an earlier harvest, starting them early isn't gonna help you. Unfortunately, the sun and the longer days is what's gonna help you. So rushing it is not in your best interest. Also, keep in mind, large plants don't transplant well. They tend to go through a little bit more shock. I have a video, I'll put it right here, on how to lessen shock and how I actually harden my plants off without hardening my plants off. And I have next to 0 shock when I do transplant, particularly large tomatoes. Check that out if you want to do the investment and the time to make that happen. And by investment, I mean like your time, not cost, because I'm using like recycled materials to do this. If you don't have the infrastructure, don't rush it. Don't rush it. Wait till March. But if you got the gusto and you're like, I just need to do something tomatoes, also cannabis, great place to start right now. Next up is celery. So this is like a wide range of options here. I've done celery for the past few years. I've had horrible luck with aphids. This year, I'm gonna try them again and I'm going to order ladybugs. However, I haven't gotten the seeds yet. So Hopefully I can start them in February at some point. Luckily, I can start them even at the end of February. The recommendation for what variety to go for would actually be the Utahs. I did a video on my seeds I don't want to grow anymore because they are just a pain in my butt to deal with. Celery was one of them. However, when I made that video, a bunch of people commented and they're like, you need to try the Utah celery. That is the winner. So I'm going to try that celery because you geek people told me to do it. So I'm going to try the Utah. However, it's not for the faint of heart. Be forewarned. You are going to have to do some level of pest management. Aphids love dry conditions. We are guaranteed going into a drought year. You need your weapons on board to take care of the aphids, because if you don't, you might be in trouble come time August, and you won't want to eat the celery anyway, so do keep that in mind. If you want an alternative to celery, if you could get the seed for it, you could also start that right now, and that'd be leverage. Leverage is a perennial plant, similar flavor, texture, everything to celery, slightly milder and more pest resistance. But again, it's a perennial and it is a huge perennial. If you have the room, something you may want to consider. Any packaging that says start before last frost and then gives you a week table that says 10 to 12, anywhere in that, if you have a flower packet that says that, start those now. The usual protocol for flowers would be to use a heat mat, and this is particularly true if you are starting flowers that were supposed to be started in January. So anything that said 14 to 15 weeks before last frost on the packaging, use a heat mat to speed up that germination process so you don't fall behind. And that goes for any plant. If you're dealing with any plant that said start 15 weeks before last frost, heat mat. So now is the time to utilize that. It will speed up the germination and it'll make sure you're not falling behind, essentially. Hardwood herbs. So I have rosemary and I have thyme. I did a video on starting rosemary and how to do it in the fridge. I also included lavender in there. Lavender would be another one. The time's running out for these. These absolutely must be started in February if you intend to grow them. Very important. Any sort of herb that has a woody stem to it needs to be started now. The reason for that is they are slower growing plants, and not to mention they do benefit from being topped and cut back and manipulated mechanically as they grow into the spring season. So anything that benefits from topping generally will need to be started here in February. I know the back of the packages says 6 to 8 weeks, but if you want a big plant, and by big plant I mean a plant that can be used in containers for decorative purposes, because that's what I use my herbs for. I make my containers that are decorative functional in a way. I use these as fillers and spillers. If you want any herb of size that you can harvest from without impeding or disrupting the look of your container, start these now. So get these in the ground. These you can do without a heat mat. You don't need a heat mat for these bad boys. Next up is mint and thyme. Now again, these are ones you could start in March. However, if you want a bigger plant, if you want to start harvesting from that plant now, start them. Why not? They're very easy to care for, very tiny seeds. If you wanted, you could also do these plants in particular in waves. So when I say waves, what that means is essentially starting plants of any nature and then starting more plants about 3 to 4 weeks after the first set. This means that you will have plants in various stages of growth in your garden during the summer months, which could allow you to harvest and replant and refill as needed. It is a method that is used by anyone who does like decorative gardening or someone that wants the garden to look full all year round. Wave planting is very, very common. Influencers, I can tell you 10 out of 10 times if they are doing any sort of presentation that looks good and pretty, they're replanting, they're wave planting. They have a continuous supply of seedlings, and these are definitely herbs that would fall into the category of something that could be started even in May. I mean, you can just continually restart these guys, a batch a month type thing until the end of the season. Next up is jalapenos or hot peppers. So last month I said jalapenos and hot peppers or super hots, And I really specifically said, you don't have to worry about the heat mat if you don't want to, because you got enough time to germinate. Now is kind of that awkward time where if you want to top, and I have a whole video on topping and whether you should do it and why you should do it if you wanted to. Not saying you need to. I personally don't top. The science says you don't have to top. If you wanted to top, you might get slightly more aesthetically pleasing vegetables, is kind of the synopsis of that video I did. But regardless, if you want a larger plant with more biomass, right now is the time to start your hot peppers, super hots, that sort of thing. Your bells, I would put off till March. You could start your Hungarian wax if you're gonna do a sweeter pepper. I highly encourage the Hungarian hot wax. It's not hot. I don't know why hot is in the name. It's a very mild, it's a bell pepper is essentially what it is, but it produces more than a classic bell pepper plant, if that makes sense. But regardless, start these now, and particularly with the hot peppers, put a heat mat under them, please, because you want them to get going a little bit quicker now, because you are technically a month behind. You're not a month behind, but something with a heat mat, definitely jalapenos or hot, super hots. If you're starting your Hungarian hot wax or bell peppers or any sort of sweet pepper, you may want to consider no heat mat. You could use a heat mat, but again, make sure you have the infrastructure to care for a larger size plant. The other one that is technically a pepper plant, but is often labeled as paprika, because I'm starting paprika this year. I go through so much paprika for color when I cook. And I thought to myself, what am I doing? Why am I not growing this plant? So I'm doing paprika seeds this year. They are somewhere in the house. I don't know where exactly, but I am going to start those here shortly. And that is when you could start in February as well. I'm not going to heat mat them, but I am going to start them here in February. And the key with any of these peppers, starting them in February in particular, is that as they get flowers, you remove the flowers until you get a ton of biomass, meaning leaves and stems. Then once you move them outside in, say, June, because you want your nighttime temps above 10 degrees Celsius, if you're dipping below 10 degrees Celsius at night, do not put them outdoors. It's called temperature differential, and I also have a video on that. No one really watched it last year. It might have been too nerdy for it is probably boring, to be honest. But temperature differential will actually influence how a plant grows. And in particular with tomatoes and hot peppers and okra and eggplants, we want to avoid putting them in a position where they are dipping below that 10 degrees Celsius or a temperature differential. I believe it was 5 degrees. So meaning 5 degrees from the daytime temp downwards can ultimately negatively affect those plants. So keep them indoors or in the greenhouse until your nighttime temps are above that. I was looking at the long-term forecast, total side note here. Not really, but kind of. I was looking at the long-term forecast, and this El Nino weather movement happening right now is slightly concerning in the sense that it is meaning that the nighttime temps are going to be really cold. June and July, there's a lot of like 10-degree nights. So I personally, just a heads up, I'm gonna put my vote in for poor tomato, poor pepper, poor eggplant, poor okra growth because of that long-term forecast showing like it's getting low. It's getting low at nights, and these plants do not like that. So cover may be necessary, even, I know it sounds crazy, in July, and that, particularly if we're getting below that 10 degrees Celsius. So something to think about if you're doing tomatoes or any of the above plants that I mentioned. You may want to think about infrastructure this year, particularly if you want a really good harvest. If you're not particular on the harvest you get, or you're intending to plant a ridiculous amount of plants like what I do, probably not an issue. Boy, tomatoes. Why do I have so many tomatoes? Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna start tomatoes in February. I'm not there yet. I got lots of other stuff to do, so I'm not gonna do it. No, I'm not gonna do tomatoes. I'm gonna do tomatoes in March though. Peppers, I'm gonna start here now. Next up is if you got the seeds that you are really not supposed to grow in your area, such as me, trying to grow these cantaloupe tasting type things, or loofahs. I'm also gonna try to grow loofahs again. Yeah, and hard neck squash. I'm also gonna try to grow those again. Life choices. Poor ones, I agree. You don't have to tell me. But Yeah, we're gonna try. Anyways, if you're gonna try to do something ridiculous that you really shouldn't be doing, now is the time to start that. I know. Anything that says 110 days, anything that says 120 days, start now. Start in February. Start as soon in February as possible, regardless of your zone. Zone 3, get your loofah, whatever, in now, in your containers. Keep in mind, many of these are not going to transplant well. They're not going to harden off well. They're going to go through shock and they're going to look half dead when you go to put them outdoors because they are going to be completely oversized because they are truly not meant to be grown anywhere in a climate above the middle of the US and upwards. But we're crazy. You're not a gardener. You're not a true gardener unless you try to do something ridiculous at least once a year. And this is my ridiculous. I've got 3 ridiculous this year. Anyways, start them now. I'll do a video on how to maybe do these really weird ones. If you guys want, comment down below because there is steps, protocols that need to be taken to really ensure that they can get through their transplant ridiculousness. Yeah, so let me know. This is 1 of 3 of my bad choices. Okay, so this is the cold climate or the cold resistant, I guess, crops you can grow or start now. Again, these crops don't have to be started in February. They can be started in February in the event you want to plant them outdoors under cover, meaning low tunnel, high tunnel, plastic window box type thing, greenhouse, etc. This would apply. If you don't have coverage, do not start these. I will tell you what month to start these in. Got it? Good. Cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, spinach, Asian greens, and kale. Now, the only one that kind of is like iffy and the only ones that are kind of iffy in this list and that you could technically start now towards the end of February, because I'm going to say start them in March anyways, is going to be broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage, particularly large head cabbage like the Copenhagen cabbage. Makes sense? Okay, so these guys don't start with a heat mat. Absolutely do not do that. You will end up with leggy, gross looking seedlings. Please do not. Start them just regular in a cell and then transplant them outdoors once you can get your interior temp of your low, high, plastic window box, whatever the case is, above the 2 degrees Celsius mark at night. And the best way to know if this is happening for you is to get a min-max thermometer. Now, what this is going to tell you is it's going to tell you what your minimum temperature is and what your maximum temperature is. Your minimum temperature will be hit during the nighttime, your maximum obviously during the daytime. And what's important about this is that we know that our nighttime temperatures are staying above 2, meaning whatever insulation we're using, whatever method we're using to keep that warm, whether it's Christmas lights, the old school Christmas lights, or something as simple as a hot water bottle, a candle, or maybe you have a sophisticated heating system, whatever it is. Whatever you're using to keep it warm at night, it is maintaining at a plus 2 degrees Celsius. Okay, makes sense. The daytime temperatures, the reason why we want to min-max is because we want to know how hot it's getting. And that means sometimes we get really intense sun, and that really intense sun can really heat up these small little greenhouse systems to the point that we cook our plants. So we want to make sure we're not getting too hot. And if we are getting too hot, we know that there is a way in which we can relieve the heat, whether that's removing the top or opening something up, having a window on it, cracking it, or putting a rock under it to lift it off the swell, whatever the case is. You want to keep those 2 in mind. You want to stay between that 2 to 5 degrees Celsius minimum and only a high of about 15 degrees Celsius. If you get warmer than that, you get leggy. If you get colder than that, obviously you freeze the plant. So keep that in mind. Infrastructure, if you have it, start these guys out. If you don't have the infrastructure, forget I said anything. I will tell you when to start these. Got it? Good. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this seeds to start in February video, please comment down below. Let me know what you're starting down below. Let people know when your last frost date is. Get crew, come on, let's go, guys. Let's go, folks. I'm joking. They know I'm joking. Anyone who's new to this channel, they know I'm joking, but they also know I'm serious because I always say this. They're smarter than I am, particularly for their area. And that goes for any gardener. Any gardener in your area is way smarter than I am. Just take that at face value because they know your environment better than I do. They know your microclimate better than what I do. So listen to your local gardener before you listen to me. And that includes your Git crew that's gonna comment down below their last frost date and what they're starting in February, because that is who you should rely on. And loosely rely on the redhead that's talking to you through this screen right now. Although I do enjoy you, and I hope you do decide to join this channel by hitting that subscribe button. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.